All right. that was an interesting edit.
Yeah, well, I figured we'd have a joint video edit together. I used your song, though.
Yeah, thank you.
So, yeah. And welcome, Andrew, to our little stream here about the Christopher Schurr trial. How have you been?
I've been awesome, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, thanks. Thanks for being here. So Nick and I, we heard that the trial was starting in a couple of weeks, and we thought we'd cover it. And then we did a stream sort of refreshing it in our minds as well as everyone else's minds, what exactly was going on. And we watched part of the video. We watched the body cam and I believe the police cam, and then we watched a little bit of the passenger's phone video. And to me, I have concerns about self-defense, and I mentioned it to you, and you're like, oh yeah, this is self-defense all day long. I'm since you are the self-defense expert, I'm happy you could join us here today to talk about this.
Yeah, I should say, as always, I'm open to persuasion. I mean, if somebody can point out, something I missed when I first looked at these videos contemporaneous with the event when they were released. So it's been a minute since I looked at them. But my strong recollection is when I looked at them, this looked like a lawful use of force to me.
Yeah, me from other side of the pond with our laws and our views, I might come in with a different approach to it because I might have a difference of opinion from Andrew Branca, which never happens. But it will be interesting to see. I mean, this will be a very good way to show our audience difference of opinions. We can still talk about it without screaming at each other and call each other names.
Well, unlike Sweden, where the government is always right. And Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but are the police officers held to the same self-defense standard as everyday citizens here in the United States generally?
Generally, so it's not really that they have a different law per se, although there can be statutory variances. Like in Colorado, for example, they've passed a law making it absolutely illegal for police to use any kind of chokehold. Even if they're going to die, they can use their gun, but they can't use a chokehold.
Seems right.
As a civilian, I can choke somebody in lawful self-defense, and it wouldn't be an issue because the statute's specific to law enforcement. So you do get kind of those weird edge cases. What tends to happen with cops in self-defense that's different than civilians is things like, for me to ever be the initial aggressor, the initial physical aggressor would lose me self-defense. I'm not allowed to start a fight. But cops are allowed to be the initial aggressors all the time. I mean, when they have to make an arrest, they have to compel compliance with the arrest. They're the first one to threaten or use force. That's lawful in that context because their use of force in the appropriate context is a lawful initiation of force, and it would only be an unlawful initiation of force that would lose you self-defense. So that you do get kind of different flavors in that respect.
Now, I don't know if you've seen the statute that specifically applies here in Michigan, because this is a Michigan case. I like to pull it up, but one of the things is that you are acting lawfully, like you're not committing a crime. And so in that context, a police officer who's forcibly engaging somebody who starts the engagement is not necessarily acting unlawfully, but could be if they didn't have any probable cause or reasonable grounds.
Yep.
What were you going to say, Nick?
And for context, over here, police officers have a higher right of self-defense because they are presumed to also act in defense of others. So you have to overcome that in order to charge a cop with wrongful.
Yeah, we don't have a legal presumption like that, but I think it's an implicit presumption generally from, times change. The police have been being demonized for a number of years here in the U.S., but traditionally, people just assume that if a cop is using force, there must be some legal basis for that. Of course, it's possible for cops to use force unlawfully too, and then they don't have any benefit over anybody else.
Right. Do you think it would be good to watch the video cold, or do you want to look at the statute real quick?
I would look at the statute, so we have that to filter the video experience through. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So this is the statute. It says an individual who is not or is not or who has not or is not engaged in the commission of a crime at the time he or she uses deadly force may use deadly force against another individual anywhere he or she has a legal right to be with no duty to retreat if either of the following applies. The individual honestly and reasonably believes that the use of deadly force is necessary to prevent the immediate death of or immediate great bodily harm to himself, herself, or another individual. The individual honestly and reasonably believe that the use of deadly force is necessary to prevent the immediate sexual assault of himself or herself or another individual, and the individual who has, the individual who has not or is not engaged in the commission of a crime at the time he or she uses force other than deadly force may use force other than deadly force against another individual where he or she has legal right to be with no duty to retreat if he or she honestly and reasonably believes. So that's the less than lethal.
Right. So it's a very common structure for justified use of force. You have a section that involves deadly force and another section that involves non-deadly force. Those are paragraphs 1 and 2 here, respectively.
Yeah.
And of course, the first paragraph, deadly force, is lengthier because deadly force basically adds additional conditions that have to be met to justify deadly defensive force that don't have to exist when you're using non-deadly force. And really, this can all be distilled down to what I talk about as the 5 elements of self-defense, right? You have to be not engaged in unlawful conduct. So you're the innocent, the 5 elements being innocence, imminence, proportionality, avoidance, and reasonableness. You have to be the innocent party. You can't be the initial aggressor. You have to be defending against a threat that's actually occurring or immediately about to occur. By the way, you kept saying immediate harm or death or whatever. It's actually imminent.
Imminent. I was sorry. I was misreading that.
Which
yeah, you're right.
It doesn't matter in this context, but there are scenarios in which they could be different things.
Right.
So imminent, you have to be defending yourself against a threat that's actually occurring or immediately about to occur, not something in the past, not something in the future. Proportional, you're not using deadly defensive force unless you're facing a deadly force threat or some equivalent like sexual assault. Avoidance looks like it's off the table here. I guess it's a stand your ground state. And reasonable.
Yeah, Michigan is a stand your ground state. Now they put the languages where you don't have a duty to retreat, but to my knowledge in Michigan, and I might be wrong, we don't have any situation that I can think of in looking at the statutes where we would have a duty to retreat. I think there are some special circumstances, locations you might be, but generally speaking, that doesn't apply.
And reasonableness, you have to have an honest belief, subjective belief in the need to act in self-defense, and that belief has to be objectively reasonable. It's not irrational. It's not based on bare fear or panic. A hypothetical, reasonable, and prudent person in the same circumstances would share that belief. Now, in terms of avoidance, even some stand your ground states, you can reacquire a duty to retreat. If, for example, you were the initial aggressor, unlawful aggressor in a conflict, often you lose self-defense unless you withdraw from the fight, communicate your withdrawal from the fight, then you regain that element of innocence. But absent that, without the withdrawal and communication, you've effectively acquired a legal duty to retreat, right? Because the only way to regain self-defense would be to retreat from the fight. But that's not going to be relevant here. I mean, obviously, the officer would not have a legal duty to retreat if we presume he's making a lawful arrest.
And that's when we get into the videos, that's one of the questions I'm going to have for you.
Sure.
Because when this first happened, I had Detroit Police Commissioner Willie Burton and City Councilman from Grand Rapids on with me. We were talking a lot about police conduct and rules of engagement sort of thing for police. And so that was why the question was posed back then. I reached out to Commissioner Burton to see if he wanted to join us for today, but I believe he is busy.
By the way, that's another way that police self-defense can vary from I'll call them civilian self-defense, is because normal people defending themselves don't have a lot of structured training in use of force. They're just normal people. Police do, and police, they also have departmental policies and they have expectations. And so what might be reasonable for a police officer could be different than what might be reasonable for one of us. In either direction, a reasonable police officer, he might have training on just how dangerous knives are, for example, that we might not have. And so that might privilege him to use more force than we would, because he would have a more reasonable understanding of the danger. On the other hand, he may also have training that things like you cannot engage in high-speed pursuit. We're just not allowing that anymore, right? Lots of jurisdictions have done that. In which case, if he engaged in high-speed pursuit, he'd be engaged in unreasonable expectation for an officer in his circumstances. He's been trained not to do that. Whereas if I did it, I mean, that might be a reasonable response for someone without that training.
And just for anybody that's just coming in and doesn't know what this case is about, Grand Rapids police officer Christopher Schurr on April 4th, 2022, had pulled over a vehicle, and that led to an altercation, and ultimately the officer shot and killed the driver of the vehicle. And I forget his name, so I don't want to mispronounce it or anything. But so that's the case we're talking about. We are talking about self-defense, but understand that we are within the confines of law enforcement for this particular case. It's not somebody coming up on their porch in Texas kind of thing. By the way, I vehemently disagreed with you on that guy, the porch shooter in Texas. I thought for sure that, but apparently Texas just agreed with you and not me. So, well, no. Actually, no. Yeah, Texas agreed with me that it was lawful self-defense, and you said
I don't know if Texas agreed. The grand jury agreed not to indict.
So
I assume that Texas is a bit more lenient than the law is generally. Texans.
You know, there's always the human element, right? So we can have the black letter law, and we can have the facts that we capture on a video, which even video is imperfect. Like in that video, people tell me all the time they see things in that video that I just don't see. And I ask them to give me a timestamp, and they never do. But then, of course, there's always the human element. I mean, that's why I always tell, our members, our clients, that the risk of getting convicted is never zero. If I have to put you in front of a jury, you could have done everything perfectly and still go to prison. Innocent people get convicted.
Not to get sidetracked too terribly much, but did you watch at all the trial of that tuber, the guy that was going down the tube and getting harassed by the teens, and he pulled out a knife and stabbed one of them when they were pushing him underwater? That would be an interesting look at. It happened last year. He was convicted.
Yeah, the Apple River Valley case.
Yes.
Yeah, I live streamed it. Yeah.
Did you? Okay.
Yeah, that was a grotesque injustice.
Yeah.
That's an example of the human factor there, though. The guy who was the defendant was married. He had no children. Everybody else in the community, they all had kids going to that high school. They're all friends. They all know each other. And in the media, local media there had been reported for years that this guy just waded into the river and was slashing at children in the river, completely poisoned any prospect for impartial trial, impartial jury there.
The thing that hung me up on that particular case is that he hid the weapon and then lied to the police that he wasn't the one involved.
Yeah, that's never good. But
that's not a good starting point.
The thing is, though, that kind of consciousness of guilt evidence, it really only should have effect if you're kind of undetermined about the actual facts of self-defense. In other words, if you could know with certainty that the self-defense itself was lawful, and then someone throws the weapon away afterwards, it doesn't make the self-defense unlawful. It doesn't change the conduct.
It just feeds into that human element that you were saying.
Yeah, right. And in that case, the consciousness of guilt should apply both ways, because the witnesses who try to, we didn't do especially much, or we were just a bunch of nice kids. No, these group of individuals were out to bully people. They were looking for victims, and this one struck back. And I told my audience, had that been me, because I can't run because of my knees, I know I don't freeze. So guess what would have happened if I had a weapon? I would have defended myself until I felt safe.
Yeah, the real lesson is don't go to places where there's a lot of drunk people.
Don't go to Sweden.
All right, so let's get into this video. So this is a series of videos that somebody edited together, and I'll put the link in the channel description just so that person gets credit. But this is we're going to start off with the, I believe, the dash cam video, and then we move into the body cam. Then we have a neighborhood camera across the street, like a Ring camera or something. And then we have handheld video from the passenger of the vehicle. And if anyone wants to comment, just let me know.
8:11 a.m. A Grand Rapids police officer observed a vehicle with an improper Michigan registration driving west on Griggs Street Southeast from Newark Avenue Southeast. The officer followed the vehicle and performed a traffic stop on Nelson Avenue Southeast, north of Griggs Street. This video is from the Grand Rapids police officer's in-car video recording.
So I think this was produced by the Grand Rapids Police Department in a press release shortly after the incident. Yeah, there we go. Okay.
This video is from the Grand Rapids police officer's in-car video recording.
I don't remember exactly what the nature of this. Oh, it was a tail light or something, right? Or I can't remember what it was.
I think bad
Car
registration.
video recording
bad
begins
plate,
90
that's what it
seconds prior to activation. Audio recording begins at activation.
I like how they blur out the bad plate from a stolen vehicle or from the. Hey, stay in the car! Stay in the car!
Nelson and Griggs.
By the way, just for context, in Michigan, I know states are all different. In Michigan, you don't get out of your vehicle if you're pulled over.
Yeah, I don't know why you would anywhere.
Yeah. And this is where the officers that I had on were saying, like, this guy was already, I know he got out of the car, but he was being super aggressive and didn't really have control of the situation. That's what they were complaining about. The police officers, the commissioners.
The police officer here did not have control.
Yeah. So when I had Detroit Police Commissioner and the Grand Rapids Commissioner on, what their criticism was is that the officer had no control over the situation throughout the entire endeavor, and that was like one of the bigger issues.
Well, I mean that could be, and there's lots of things that can happen in these confrontations where you look at it, you say, well, that person shouldn't be a cop. They should be fired.
Yeah.
They're just not good at this job. Most people are not going to be good at being police officers, but that's a different issue than whether or not the use of force was lawful.
Right. Right.
Looking at the distance here, it seems like besides him stepping out, it does seem like a reasonably calm situation this far.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, it's not really calm though. I would disagree. The guy's out of his car. That's not normal. That's going to put up red flags for the officer. And now, of course, they're fighting.
Okay, here we go.
Now they're fighting.
One running northbound, additional units, Nelson and Griggs.
You can see them. They're up here in this corner here. There's not like the best angle of any of these. You got to kind of take them all together, right?
Yep.
You can see the officers on top of him trying to get him down. And my understanding is this is his house, too, the suspect's house. He's parked in front of it. Not that that matters at the moment. The officer doesn't know that.
1915, what's your location?
You can see the passenger getting out of the vehicle. Looks like everything might be just off camera. You must be yelling pretty loud if you can hear it through the rain and in the car.
1915.
I can smell the inside of that police car. Nobody's coming to help the cop.
Nope.
Nope.
Neighbors are out on the porch. Yeah. Well, that's the guy standing there is the passenger of the vehicle. Oh, there's the shot.
And
So
the passenger does not react.
no, he just sort of stands there. So that's like 4 minutes in. Like 4 minutes from when the stop is initiated, really, is when the shot happens. Yeah, and the passenger is just standing there.
Yeah.
6
That's a lot of views on TikTok.
World star, baby.
Not the first time he's seen somebody arrested.
Nope.
It is. Thank you, 15.
So let's go to the body cam.
Hey, stay in the car. Stay in the car. Stay in the car. Get in the car.
Yeah.
Dude,
No.
I'm stopping you. Do you have a license? Do you have a license?
What?
I'm stopping you. Do you have a license?
What done?
Do you have a driver's license? Do you speak English?
Yes.
Can I see your license?
What do you want?
The plate doesn't belong in this car. Do you have a license or no? Do you have a driver's license? Where is it at?
It's in the car.
Get it for me.
What do you want?
The plate does not belong in this car.
Right there.
No. Stop.
I'm hearing an echo somewhere.
Yeah, it's echoing.
1915. Got one running. North south. Stop.
If you have to hold your pants up while you're running, they are too low.
Yes.
Stop. Get your hands behind your back. Hands behind your back. Get your hand behind your back. $19.50. 34 cars.
Yeah, so we noticed the cop's out of breath already, right? And that was one of the other things that the commissioners were criticizing the officer on, is that he's obviously out of breath. He's in a situation, he's a little over his head at this point. And that's where they were saying, like, as an officer, we would have expected you to maybe step back a second, gain control of the situation a little bit. But
Yeah, I mean, of course, that's what they're going to say. They know it's a bad outcome case, right? But if you're in the moment, you don't know you're going to end up shooting somebody in the head.
Right.
But what I do notice is this cop obviously does not know how to fight. He's not been adequately trained in how to control a suspect. And I would blame that on the commissioners.
yeah,
I mean, they're the ones that are supposed to provide the training. When you leave your cops poorly trained, they go to weapons sooner because it's all they have.
right. Now, I believe at this point, he's already pulled the taser. So the officer has the taser in hand, but not his service weapon.
Stop. Stop resisting.
Oh, yeah, hella, he does.
Right there. That's bad.
Okay, so this is the shot I wanted to say, because the news media runs with cop shoots unarmed man.
Yeah.
In my estimation, at this point, he's armed.
He's armed, right? And he's simultaneously armed and disarming the officers of his non-lethal weapon, right? And
Right.
it's very important to keep in mind when we talk about things like tasers or pepper spray, we always presume their lawful use, and the lawful use is non-deadly in nature. It's what you use instead of a gun. So you can compel compliance without risking someone's death or serious bodily injury. But the use of these tools, pepper spray or a taser, offensively, unlawfully, is very different. Because when it's being used lawfully, the presumption is you get control of the suspect and then you don't use any more force on them. You cuff them up, you don't continue beating them. But when a bad guy's using these tools, the presumption is that now that the good guy is going to be disabled, especially if he's got a gun on him like this cop does, now he's at risk of getting killed with his gun. And most cops who are shot in the course of their duty are shot with their own guns that they lose control of. two suspects. So this is something the cop would be very much aware of. If I lose control of this taser, it's not like the guy's got a non-deadly force weapon. I have to deal with that as a deadly force threat now.
Right. And that's what I was getting at is, even under the statute, I believe, honest and reasonable belief that the use of deadly force is necessary to prevent an imminent, I'll say it right, death or imminent great bodily harm to himself or herself. At this point, like you just explained, he's got now a weapon that
can disable him.
Could disable him and then lead to his service weapon being removed and everything else. So, but that was what I was getting at. As a news media, he was unarmed. Well, at this point, he's armed.
No.
That was
But now a question with deadly force. Is it when the deadly force, when the force can result in death, or is it, because we will come to this later on, when the death is expected?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I understand, but there has to be a reasonable expectation of deadly force. It can't just be a 1 in a million chance, right? Otherwise, a fist to the face could be deadly force, and it's generally not going to be.
Because generally, I mean, a shot in the stomach, yes, it can lead to death.
Oh no,
but not necessarily.
Well, I think
but
no, deadly
the
force
use of
in
a
this
firearm
context
is inherently deadly.
Yeah, by deadly force, we mean force that can cause death, fatality, or serious bodily injury.
Okay.
So
right.
Any gunshot is going to be serious bodily injury.
Does a taser qualify? Let's assume for the sake of argument that we're going to qualify this suspect now as being armed with a taser. Does that qualify as reasonable belief that the use of deadly force is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm?
Yeah, because I would say
really
an offensive use of a taser, an unlawful use of a taser. Tasers are intended to disable the target. A disabling injury to this police officer in a fight with someone, a criminal suspect, that raises an imminent risk of death or serious bodily injury. If the cop is going to be knocked unconscious and then wake up in a day and be fine, you'd still say losing consciousness in these circumstances would present an imminent deadly force risk.
Right. I was hoping to log in. I don't have any case law under the statute right now. I'm going to try to log in as we play this so I can maybe grab some case law.
I mean, I can tell you, for example, for sure, when it comes to pepper spray, which would be an equivalent to the taser here, a lot of times, bank robbers, people don't know this, but there's lots of bank robberies in America. They happen all the time. They just don't get in the media for some reason. But a lot of times bank robbers will go into a bank like with pepper spray or bear spray and just hose everybody down to facilitate their robbery of the bank. And then when they get caught by the feds, because these bank robbers are idiots, they always get caught. The feds charge them, in addition to the bank robbery, with felony battery on the bank staff for the use of the pepper spray. In other words, battery that causes or can inflict death or serious bodily injury. Now, it's not that the pepper spray was going to kill the bank employees, but they say the pain and suffering from the pepper spray qualifies as serious bodily injury in the offensive use, the unlawful use of the chemical irritant, and they get convictions on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it would, and I would say it would in this situation too. But again, with the human element and with the media for the last 2 years being out there, is that he was unarmed. You got to sell it. Defense has to sell it that this guy was armed in this moment.
I mean, the key issue, of course, isn't really armed or unarmed. It's, did the person present as an imminent deadly force threat? If you look at like the George Zimmerman, Trayvon Martin case, for example, Trayvon Martin wasn't armed, but the shooting was still lawful because Trayvon Martin was beating George Zimmerman's head into a sidewalk. His nose was sideways on his face. His face was covered in blood when police arrived at the scene. And, you're smashing someone's head on a sidewalk, that's likely to cause death or serious bodily injury, bleeding on the brain and so forth. So, I mean, I say that Trayvon Martin was armed with his fists, with the sidewalk, and with the entire earth providing gravity that allowed him to keep George Zimmerman pinned in place.
Wasn't that the Nicolas Cage movie? He was like, his fists were deadly weapons because of his training or something.
So it just depends on the circumstances.
Right. And obviously, I think the officer is unintentionally or pulling the trigger here.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a suspect pulling the trigger.
Yeah, but does it matter if where he is holding the taser?
Where
Because
who's
as
holding
of
it?
now, the suspect here is, to my how I would see it, he's trying to avoid being tased, so he's grabbing onto the barrel.
Right. So 2 issues there. One is he's not allowed to do that. He's not allowed to resist a lawful use of force by the police. The police are trying to compel compliance with the lawful arrest. So he's not the suspect being lawfully arrested has no legal privilege to use force.
Okay,
to
but
resist the lawful
is it
arrest.
still considered? Is he arming himself when he's
Yeah, the
holding
other
onto the barrel?
Right. So the other problem is generally the barrel part of a taser or a gun is longer than the grip part. So if you have your hand on the barrel part, you have more leverage than the person holding the grip of the pistol. It's actually not that hard to take a pistol out of someone's hand. I've done it. I've been trained in weapons retention. And more to the point, what really matters here is what's the reasonable perception of the officer. He's holding the grip. He can feel if he's losing control of that. So it's what he was perceiving in the moment. Was I losing control of that? And it's certainly not hard to imagine how that could be the case. This is not a small suspect.
So there's a case out of Michigan here. It's talking about tasers specifically, but tasers in the offensive being used in response to a deadly force thing. It says Michigan courts have classified that deadly force refers to an action where the natural, probable, and foreseeable consequence is death. And it says, for example, merely displaying a knife without more, it does not constitute deadly force. So you actually have to attempt to use the knife by way of an example. But it's natural, probable, and foreseeable consequence. And then a taser designed for temporary incapacity rather than to cause death would generally fall in the category of non-deadly force unless used in a manner that could foreseeably result in a situation where death would result. And I think that's maybe where we could get it because of the, if we knock them out, then you get access to a service weapon sort of thing.
Yeah. Also, when we read these cases, we have to be very careful to distinguish between when this kind of interpretation is being done in a self-defense context and when it's being done in an aggravated battery context, because the courts use the same words, but they use them differently. So if a criminal defendant's been charged with aggravated battery because he merely displayed a knife, the courts might say, well, we're not going to make that a felony aggravated battery. He didn't even try to use it. We're not going to convict him on that for simply displaying a knife. But if you display a knife to another person, could that person reasonably perceive that as an imminent deadly force threat in the self-defense context? For sure.
I'm just trying to get more. I'm doing cursory searches here. I should have done this beforehand, but
I mean, if
I'm pulling up the case a little bit more.
Say I had, let's imagine I had a gun in a holster. I'm not going to stand up. Let's imagine I had a gun in a holster and I just opened up my jacket and walked up to somebody and showed them that I had a gun in a holster. Said, give me your wallet. I never touch the gun. I never draw the gun. I never point the gun, but it's still an implicit threat. It's still an armed robbery. This
case here, by the way, a guy ends up serving 3 years. The argument started over grass clippings on the sidewalk.
Of course.
So this is some perspective here, folks.
I mean, I'm not that surprised because when I used to have neighbors, I had some really asshole neighbors. And many disputes. I would imagine if you go looking through all the cases where somebody is just brandishing a knife or a weapon, how big a percentage of that is neighbors?
Oh, a ton.
I would imagine that's maybe even the majority.
Yeah, a good fraction of the cases I've consulted on for use of force are neighbors. They're property line disputes. They're nonsense. I mean, people pointing guns at each other for no really good reason, except they're mad.
Right.
I mean, thank God for stupid people. I wouldn't have anything to do.
I know, that's our bread and butter, right?
Yeah, imagine if all employers were nice, I would have nothing to do.
The officer's body-worn camera deactivated at this point.
And it comes down when he's given resuscitation. All right, so this is the neighbor across the street. I had the police call on me once because I was shoveling out the parking lot of my office and I was putting it right on the property line on the curb. And the neighbors called the police because when the snow melts, it floods their driveway. And the police were like, well, then maybe you need to fix your driveway. You just
Yeah, I have my two neighbors. One is 100 yards that way. The other one is 150 yards that way.
Yeah.
And I'm still considering moving more remote.
Yeah, this was just bad situation control throughout the entire.
There they go. Yep, down to the ground.
Might be besides the point, but we know roughly the size of the cop, and we can see the size of the suspect. Self-awareness here should have been greater with the cop.
That most of that voice is the bystander with the white top there who's filming. He's talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, narrating.
Yeah, you hear him more in the other videos.
This reminds me of the cop who was shot in the YSL trial by a person who wasn't even a defendant in the YSL trial. He was like maybe Dave's size, and the suspect was 6'3", 220.
That sound was a taser discharging.
And there was no way he could try bring him down. And he still jumped out of his unmarked car, not dressed as a cop, not addressing himself as a cop. And he got shot.
In about 10 seconds, the fatal shot will be captured on this video.
I think it cuts away. I don't think they have the sound. No. I feel like the bartender might have lost that fight in the long run there, Cowpoke. Okay, so obviously they cut it off before the shot. I'm not sure why. But now this is the passenger that was in the vehicle is filming, and it gets a little grainy, but this is where we get really the best angle of what exactly is going on.
Yeah, and I believe here is my main argument that is here I really can't see self-defense anymore, and it's a just one small frame.
Yeah, I think it's the frame that's on our thumbnail.
This is the entire video obtained from a third-party cell phone recording.
How nice of them to call the passenger of the stolen car a third party.
We don't know that it's stolen. It's just might be a stolen plate, Nick.
Stop. Stop resisting.
No, you good. You're not resisting nothing, bro.
And passenger can't film push. Yeah.
Okay, why you gotta do all that, bro? He good, man.
That was the sound of a taser discharging.
They're still struggling over the taser.
Yeah, he's got it in his hand right there. The suspect does, I mean.
No, like he's good. Like you can talk to him, bro.
And he could talk to him, just let go of the taser.
Yeah. Like he's good, bro. Like can you talk to him like good? Like can you? Yeah. Stop grabbing him like that. No, he's good like for real. Yo, you hear him too.
He had
You could
one
tell the
job.
officers-
He had one job.
No, he ain't grabbing no tail. Nah, I see that.
Focus. So the officers pulled a service weapon out now, and it looks like both hands might still be on the taser at this point. That's kind of what I'm seeing, and he's still giving him the instructions to stop to drop the taser.
Oh,
Now they cut it out. Sorry, they cut it out right there. Let me go back. But
On Monday,
Like he's good, bro.
let me do this. Right before he takes the fatal shot, right before the video cuts out, he shoots him in the back of the head. By the way, the officer shoots the suspect in the back of the head. He's on top of him like this, and Nick pointed out that the officer let go of the taser.
yeah.
And
Not
got
only
his
let
left
go.
hand
Yeah,
up.
not. He leans up. He grabs the head and pushes the head towards the ground, and then he fires. That is the moment I have issues with, because that is such
Why
a
is
conscious
that?
decision.
Oh, he's definitely made the conscious decision. He's going to shoot this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Well, and
that conscious decision also can be a conscious decision. Do I need to shoot him in the neck, which I know will be fatal, and use possibly lethal force, which is pushing myself off, firing a shot in the back, in the ass, in the foot?
Yeah, none
No.
of that matters from a U.S. legal perspective. The moment you put a
No.
bullet into the guy, you're using deadly force.
Yeah, but
Now let me ask you this though: when he draws his service weapon, is it at that moment that he has to have the perception of imminent death or great bodily harm?
Yes, when he's made the decision to use the force, right? That's the mental process. He has to then have a subjective and objectively reasonable belief that he needs to use deadly force to neutralize an unlawful imminent deadly force threat to his life.
Okay, so now let's assume for about 2 minutes or so, he's been struggling to get this taser.
Right.
The suspect
It's
is
not
laying-
working, right?
It's not working. The
Yeah.
suspect is laying on the taser. Both of their hands are on it at this moment. And then he draws a service weapon. I believe his left hand is still on the taser along with the suspect's. And then at some point he removes his left hand. He raises it up. So
Yep.
I don't see a taser in the hand at the time. And then the video ends, but that's when the shot's taken. Presumably that's what the report is anyways.
Right.
And we'll watch it again here real quick. And then I just want to know your thoughts on this.
How many cars you got going?
Drop taser!
yeah, you could see in the last frame of this, you could see when he pushes down the head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wish
So-
this video didn't end right here.
Well, we'll get a good sense of what else you like to watch on YouTube. What it
Yeah.
feeds in at the end.
Yeah, right. Try to get that down. But yeah, so this all right, so the gun is drawn, and I don't know where his left hand is. Presumably, maybe it's not on the taser at this point either. He just raises it up.
It
Raises
might be
his
on
hand
his shoulder.
before.
He's trying. Look at his legs. He's trying to keep his balance, right? He's trying not to get thrown off
Yeah.
at this point. He's made the decision. When he pulls the gun, he's like, he's been struggling for several minutes now. He's getting blown. He's had trouble breathing. He thinks he's losing control of the fight, losing control of the taser. The taser's also a projectile weapon, right? It has the darts that can be fired. It's only been used like
Right.
in stun mode right now. But the cop can't get safe from the taser unless he can clear 12 or 15 feet away from this guy before the taser could be used on him. That's not going to happen. So he's made the decision. I may have to shoot this guy. I'm losing control of this taser. I can't keep fighting like this indefinitely. You just run out of gas. So he pulls the gun, gives a couple more commands, then decides this is it. I can't keep control of the taser. I'm not winning the fight. I'm losing it. If this guy has control of the taser and I don't use deadly force, I'm disabled, and then I'm helpless.
Yeah. The fact that he's an officer in the situation, aside from the aggressiveness, obviously, or, the initiator of the contact, does that play anything into your analysis based under the statute here that we're looking at?
I mean, so not much. Listen, I could have a lot of criticism of this guy's performance in this arrest. There's certainly things I would do differently, but we have to keep in mind, he only has the level. The police department hired this guy. So whatever his level of judgment is, they hired him. They provided him with whatever level of training they thought was appropriate for his job. He's on the job. They've got him on the street. As far as the department's concerned, he's good enough for them, or he wouldn't be out there. And it's easy for us now to kind of bias our perspective of the flow of the fight with the knowledge of what happens at the end. But at each moment of this fight, this cop doesn't know he's going to have to shoot somebody. So at each step, you have to evaluate each step as it's occurring with the knowledge that the cop has. He's not doing anything unlawful. He's allowed to stop the vehicle for a bad plate. He's allowed to write the person a ticket. He's allowed to demand a driver's license and registration and insurance. He's allowed to keep the person from fleeing the scene. He's allowed to make an arrest if the person attempts to flee from the traffic stop. If the person will not submit to arrest, he's allowed to use reasonable force to compel compliance with the arrest. And if that ends up in a fight where the other guy's fighting for the officer's weapons, it's hard for me not to see that as self-defense. Even though in hindsight, I would criticize this cop for not being effective, not controlling the suspect, not knowing how to fight.
Knowing your own size and capabilities, not knowing that. I mean, there's a lot of issues here with the officer. But yeah.
But to my mind, those are grounds for maybe the guy not being a cop, maybe for the guy not being fired. It doesn't, to my mind, undermine the fundamental claim of self-defense.
Are you planning on watching this trial at all?
First of all, I don't know if it's televised. I just checked a few minutes ago, and Grok also doesn't know if it's televised. If it's televised, I'll have a difficult decision to make because it's normally I would. Oh, will they?
We're gonna, yeah. So there's a local ABC affiliate that says that they're going to cover it and stream it. So we'll be doing that. This might be I'm keeping it muted because I think it's reporters talking. But so at this moment here, he's made the decision. He's got his gun out. He just pulled it out. And
well, he doesn't shoot right here. He gives a few more commands after that.
Yeah. No, I thought that was the video.
Yeah, because when we looked at it in the last stream, you could see the moment where he actively pulls the head towards the ground.
Yeah, I don't know what video I was looking at. Man. Yeah, because you could see it where he pushes the head down and then pulls the trigger.
I mean, once you've reached the point where it would be lawful to use deadly force, you're allowed to be efficient in your use of deadly force. You don't have to do it inefficiently.
Yeah, and I think there is my... because even though I can't put myself in his situation, he has, from where he pulls the gun, he has the option to shoot him in the lower back, higher up. He has the option to, but the active choice to go up to a knowingly kill shot.
It's all, yeah. So when under U.S. law, when you're using deadly force, it's presumed it's going to be a kill shot. Now, as a practical matter, people get shot a lot with 9mm pistols, and it doesn't stop them. I mean, the most common reaction cops get when they shoot people is, "Holy crap, you shot me!" I mean, they're very underpowered weapons in terms of actually compelling a human being to stop doing what they're doing. If you genuinely believe if you don't shoot that person, he's going to kill you, he's disable you, and then kill you in the next moment. Shooting him in the head is completely within the scope of it's all deadly force. Once you're in the deadly force bucket, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
I've seen people get shot by cops and keep coming.
Yeah,
I've seen those videos.
Yeah. We have an example of here in Sweden. I think I mentioned it before. There were a group of cops. There was a guy presumably armed, and they emptied their guns at him. I mean, we're talking about 12 in magazine, 4 cops. I mean, we're talking close to 50 fired rounds. He was hit 3 times.
Well, that's not. And cops don't.
Yeah, and the neighborhood was riddled with bullet holes.
Yeah.
Cops can't aim here either.
Yeah, no. If
You
I
talked
ever
about the
see a
training
cop,
of this.
if I ever see a
Sorry,
cop
go
draw a gun on the street, I'm running.
Yeah, duck and run.
Probably the safest place I could be if he was
It's in
aiming
his-
at me.
Yeah.
So an eyewitness apparently described the officers having control of the situation before the shooting. That officer was not in control.
No.
This is, I think, the neighbor
Oh
testifying.
no. There was in no point did he have control over the situation. Not even when he stepped out of the cop car did he have control of the situation. Because he stepped out and the other person stepped out and he didn't obey orders. Maybe there would be the time, okay, I'm going to stay here and look and call for reinforcement because this is a person that can and is obviously not listening to me.
Right. Did you guys see the case where the cop shot 9 rounds at the autistic kid? Yeah, and I think they just wounded him in the leg. So there's what you say about that, cops.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I heard about that. I briefly saw an article about it. I didn't read it in depth, except that he was shot 9 times in the leg, and he's going to recover just fine, from what I understand. But the glaring issue there was the cops and their bad aim.
Yeah, I can assure you that there's not a police department in the United States that shoots any of their trains any of their officers to shoot anybody in the leg. They're all taught to shoot upper center mass of the chest, and if they hit someone in the leg, it's because they don't know how to shoot. They just miss.
Yeah. So given the human element that you talked about earlier, having watched these videos again, I know you've been involved in many jury trials and things like that, and you know how juries could be sometimes. Would you like to put some odds on whether or not this officer gets convicted? I will say that this is a fairly white side of the state, a fairly religious and conservative. This is where all the DeVosses come from and things like that. If you know Betsy DeVos and all of that, this is a fairly conservative side of the state, fairly conservative district. That plays into it for me especially when we're talking about the human element. I think there's an opportunity for this officer to be acquitted, but I still don't necessarily, in my mind, see self-defense being workable.
Yeah, so that's why I never predict jury verdicts because it's especially not having been involved in like any of the jury selection process for a case. You don't know who these people are, and that's one of the. I always tell people, because my legal practice is a consulting practice. I don't represent clients directly. All my clients are lawyers, and I have a very deep but narrow, skinny area of expertise. There's 1,000 things that go into a criminal defense of a client beyond my area of expertise. And some of that is arguing in front of the jury and seeing the expressions on their face and what's working and what's not working during the voir dire of the jury ahead of time, seeing what they're responding to, not responding to, getting a sense of who's lying to you to get onto the jury. So that human element is so hard to predict. And I know there's things like jury consultants, and I think they're it's tarot cards.
Jury consultants are they're reading tea leaves and tarot cards and stuff like that. I will say, but I want to point this out. Apparently, that kid that was shot, they amputated his leg and then he ended up dying. So that's very sad. I didn't know that. I thought he was just minorly injured, like flesh wounds. So
is that the kid who had
less funny now.
The knife, but it was on the other side of a chain link fence? Is that the story?
I think so. I'm not entirely sure of the entire facts. But maybe we'll have to look into that one. That's sad. But speaking of reading juries, or that sort of thing, there's those body language experts, which is just hocus pocus. And they're like, well, he blinked or he winked at the right time, and this means this. There is something to be said, though, for being in the same room with a group of people. And when you're talking and you're getting that feedback from them, and I tell, the same story over and over. I had a spanking case, and there was this elderly Black woman, and I wanted her on the jury because I knew she spanked her kids. And every time I spoke, she was, and every time the prosecutor spoke, she was like, stand back and, shake her head. Those are the things that are good to read.
Right.
And that was my acquittal right there. That woman, she even came up to me after the trial. But the whole, they blinked too much or they frowned or wrinkled their forehead, that sort of stuff is nonsense.
Or they looked up and left. Like, come on.
Yeah. And then you have that guy, Dr. G, who edits videos to fit his narrative. and then he presents it. He did that to Zachary Anderson, but he pulled that video down after a bunch of people told him, "Yeah, you're a licensed clinical psychiatrist, cold water rule." And boom, he took that video down fast as F.
Yeah, so I meant to mention, so when the work I do is very technical, it's just legal analysis. So it's the black letter law applied to the facts of the case. And most of the work I do, there is no jury. I mean, most of the cases I work on, we get the charges dismissed. But it's in that context. It's a very technical legal analysis. It doesn't really take into account the personalities of the jurors. Normally there aren't any when we get a case dismissed. And it's hard to account for that in what I do. So what I present to my clients, who are the lawyers in the cases, listen, this is how it should work. This is, to a reasonable degree of legal certainty, what the legal outcome should be. And they have to manage those human factors.
Yeah, whatever outcome, it will be really interesting to see, because there's so much we don't know. What did the officer say in the interviews? There's so much we don't know that is unknown. If he just went into his cop car or his fellow cop cars and said, "Yeah, I'm glad I killed him." Yeah, that won't. I don't know if that happened. That was just an example, but there's so much.
You can blow up a self-defense case pretty quick.
Yeah,
with what you say. Yeah, no. I mean, if the cop just said, "Yeah, I was just tired of dealing with that guy," that wouldn't be good.
And that's the thing. So we have a preliminary examination that I think Nick and I are going to stream. I'm trying to make sure that we have all of it together. The entire preliminary examination, because that's going to be very telling on what this officer has to say, I think. And it did go the preliminary examination. There was a motion to quash that went up to the Court of Appeals that was sent back down and said, no, take it to trial. It's not enough. So we have trials scheduled for April 8th. And I guess Wood TV is the name of the station.
April 8th.
Is going to be covering it.
May 8th or
not May. No, May or April 28th. I'm sorry.
Jury selection starts next Monday, I think. Are they going to televise that? Yeah. I mean, you can't see the jurors anyway, but you can hear the questions.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to do that unless Nick wants to. We haven't really discussed that. We were just going to discuss, streaming the trial itself. What's interesting, though, is I called the court because I didn't see a trial date on the court's docket. And so I called the court and I said, hey, is it actually going to go on April 28th? Because sometimes they move things last minute. And they said, well, we don't see it on the docket either. That's strange. And I said, well, can you tell me if there's a notice of media coverage? And they said, no, we have nothing filed. So they don't have even a trial notice in the docket, but everyone's saying it's starting April 28th. So maybe Gronks doesn't have the information because of that. I don't know. There's something weird with the file.
So I see someone in the comments asking about, was he charged with murder or manslaughter? I think it was murder, but certainly second degree. So how do they differentiate in your state? Every state does this differently. Is first degree like aggravated?
Essentially, you intend to do the act, but you don't intend the death.
Oh. That's so
weird. Michigan has a murder statute, but everything else is like common law in Michigan. So second degree murder is common law.
That's strange because if he is actively aiming for the head, I'm having a hard time seeing if they are ever going to charge him.
Yeah. In most states, you're presumed to intend the natural consequences of what you do. So you can't shoot someone in the head and say, well, I didn't mean for them to die.
That's kind of a hard thing. I mean,
right.
Let me pull up the elements here real quick. I have this AI thing part of my Lexus account, and it's
Are we going to read about you, Dave? Are we going to read about you using AI?
It gives me the citations. It'll say, according to this case, second degree murder requires da-da-da-da-da, and then I go and look at the case. So let's see here. Second degree murder is distinct. Okay, so what this is we have a statute that defines first degree murder, which is the intentional unlawful killing with, that sort of thing. Second degree murder is distinguished from first degree murder by the absence of the premeditation and deliberation. So that's it's a general intent crime, meaning that the prosecution does not need to prove specific intent to kill, but rather an intent to act in a manner that demonstrates a disregard of life and endangering consequences.
What's
So
the
that's what it
sentence? What's the sentence range for that?
That's a
Can
good
you get
question.
life, or is it more like a manslaughter sentence?
You could get life. You can get life.
Yeah,
for
all right.
sure.
Then, well, then it's just for me, that's just murder. So, premeditation can occur in an instant. It doesn't require, you have chloroform and a rope and duct tape in the trunk of your car. Obviously, that would all qualify as premeditation. But premeditation, just in most states, I'm speaking generally, just means you're doing something that is likely to have a particular result, and you do it anyway. It can.
What's ironic is that if you look inside of a police officer's cruiser, you see everything there to point to first-degree murder, premeditation. They have handcuffs and ropes and weapons, and
they have all the equipment of serial killers. I mean,
but of course, killings in self-defense are premeditated murder, except you have the justification of self-defense. I mean, you're intentionally killing someone.
The elements do require without excuse or justification.
Right, sure.
Imprisonment for life or any term of years, and then we have a whole sentencing guideline. So depending on this guy's past and stuff like that, it might not reach life, but so life or any term of years. That's what the Michigan.
Someone the reason I ask is someone in the comments had asked about manslaughter. Could this be murder or could this be manslaughter? It could be manslaughter without me looking at Michigan law, but generally speaking, there's two kinds of manslaughter. There's involuntary, where you act recklessly, like Alec Baldwin when he killed Helena Hutchins, and then there's voluntary manslaughter, when you mean to cause someone the harm, but you're in it's in hot blood. It's a state of passion. The classic example is, some dude comes home and finds his wife in bed with somebody else. But it can also happen in a fight. You're in a fist fight with a dude, and the passions rise, and you end up killing that dude. And the way the law thinks of it is, because it was a hot-blooded killing, not a cold-blooded killing, they say you could not form the specific intent required for murder. And so they mitigate the murder down to manslaughter. Now, how states deal with that, manage that mitigation is different. Like we have the stabbing case in Texas, right? The Carmelo Anthony, 17-year-old stabbed the white guy, 17-year-old. The way Texas does it, a lot of states, it's a separate statute. So you have a murder statute, you have a voluntary manslaughter statute. The jury gets instructions on both, and they decide. In Texas, you just get convicted of murder, and assuming you get convicted of murder. And then during the sentencing phase, the defense has an opportunity to try to mitigate murder down to manslaughter by arguing, sufficient provocation and heat of passion and that kind of stuff.
I just covered the Tamor McIntyre case, and there they had the option of capital murder, murder two, and then they went into sentencing, because it was not capital murder, it was just murder one. But the difference here for this kid, because he was 16 at the time, is had he been convicted as an adult, life without parole, now it is 5 to 99 years, since he was a juvenile at the time, but tried as an adult.
Is that a Texas case too?
Yeah, that's a Texas case.
Yeah, right. It's a weird range.
It's a weird range. 5 to 99 for murder one. I mean, and the difference between he is a minor but tried as an adult, difference between an adult tried as an adult. It's strange.
So Michigan, we have a statutory manslaughter charge, involuntary manslaughter.
Right.
Voluntary manslaughter is common law, but it's essentially sentenced the same way as involuntary manslaughter. Okay. And again, it's like you said, it's all the elements of murder without the malice.
Right.
Yeah, and it's heat of passion, that sort of thing. So, but he's going to have lesser included, so maybe that's where the jury always goes for the compromise vote. I would always bank on that. Like I have misdemeanor DUI cases, right? And so the lesser included of a DUI in Michigan is driving while visibly impaired, which the important part about that is your driver license sanctions are wholly different between that and a DUI. And if you're not able to get a plea out of the prosecutor, you're like, well, let's just take it to trial, because, 2 of the 3 options is much better than what you're offering.
Right.
So, we can easily get a compromise vote. I always bank on the compromise vote. So
how
maybe it goes
do lesser includeds work in Michigan? Does the prosecution just get them, or do you have to ask for them, or who decides whether or not they're included?
The prosecution would have to bring them as a charge.
Okay.
Yeah. So if they don't bring them as a charge, you can get instructions. But as a defense, you can get instructions, but you have to then essentially say you have to file a motion requesting that the jury be given lesser options, the lesser included, and then the court has to rule on that to decide whether or not it's appropriate if the elements are potentially there and things like that.
Yeah.
But
So
if
they're
the
not
prosecutor,
automatic.
if the prosecutor brings cascading charges, right, murder and then all
Correct.
the way down, can the defense, the prosecutor can just do that, right? So the lesser includeds are there if the prosecutor
Right.
wants them.
Yes, and they're there if you want them. So if you, as a defense, don't want them because
Right.
you're like, no, I want the jury to either be like straight up murder or
Right.
acquittal,
Right.
then you're out of luck if the prosecutor decides to bring the lesser included.
Yeah.
Now, conversely, if you want the lesser included, you have to file a motion and ask the court for the lesser included. So
Yeah.
So
And
you
also
can't just
in the-
you can't just demand them.
Yeah, but in the Crumbley case, Jennifer Crumbley case, they brought in, if I remember correctly, they brought in a lesser included after they made a mistake and applying the wrong statute. And then they asked
They
the
brought
judge
in they brought in two different theories. Is that what you're talking? So they brought in like two involuntary manslaughter counts under different theories, and that was the big issue with Crumbley.
That should
So they
never be
said
allowed.
there's
That's horrible.
involuntarily manslaughter because they negligently handled the firearm, and then they negligently handled their kid or something like that. It was like two independent theories of
Right.
involuntary manslaughter. I misquoted that, I'm sure, but that was the idea. And it was like you can find, and the kicker is that the judge told the jury that if 6 of you think it's under this involuntary
right.
manslaughter and the other 6
Oh
think
my
this,
God.
it's still involuntary manslaughter, you can convict. And we're like, wait a minute here. That was the big issue with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think the prosecution should be allowed to do that and present alternative theories for guilt, even if it has to be unanimous on each one. I think the prosecutor should be compelled. They have a narrative of guilt. Sell that narrative of guilt. Pick your fight. Make that fight. That's it. You don't get multiple choice. And definitely the jury, we should not allow, and many states do, we should not allow like 3 members of the jury to vote guilty for one reason and 3 members for another reason and 3 members because then you haven't proved a particular narrative of guilt, any single particular narrative of guilt, beyond a reasonable doubt to a unanimous jury.
Yeah, because if, okay, I don't believe in that, but I believe in this, well, then you have reasonable doubt on the other.
Right.
That's still reasonable doubt.
Yep.
Yeah, and we're allowed to have jury polls. So like if you get a conviction, you can say, Judge, I want to poll the jury, but it's very limited questions. It's like, was this your vote? Did you vote guilty? We can't dive into, well, did you really agree that this element was met? Do you agree with your neighboring jurors that this is the exact charge? We can't get into that. Yeah. I wish we could. That would be great. But this should be an interesting case.
Yeah.
And from all indications that I have following Wood TV, they're going to be streaming it. So we should have at least one source. And if not, I'm local. I'm going to try to get it on Zoom. That's what I reached out to the court about. I was like, if there's no cameras in there, can you at least open up a Zoom feed so that we can watch this? So if it's possible, Nick and I are going to be streaming this trial. So it'll be a good time.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll be happy to send you an invite, Andrew. And if you can, you can. If you can't, you can't. But I think since this is a self-defense case, it would be valuable for us to have you on.
I appreciate it. I think on the legal merits, remember, the prosecution has to disprove self-defense beyond a reasonable doubt, right? So I just don't see a prosecutor being able to do that on the legal merits. But all these human factors matter. And whether they can sell it, the prosecutor is going to be talking about all this. He could have backed off. He knew where he lived. He had his driver's license, whatever. And we know, because we know it was a bad outcome case, that this guy ended up getting shot on the head. That's something the cop didn't know at each phase of this fight with this dude. He didn't know until the last instant he was going to have to shoot that guy in the head. But we know, and it kind of colors how we perceive every decision the cop made. I mean, I guarantee you, if that cop knew that at the end of that interaction, he was going to have to shoot that guy in the back of the head, he wouldn't have stopped the car.
Yeah. Or he would have stayed in the car. As for backup. hey, let somebody else shoot him. Yeah, but again, we have seen cases, all three of us, where we more or less all are in agreement this shouldn't have been brought to trial, and they still get a conviction. And
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have that much. I mean, of course, for me, it's I make money when they bring it to trial, so I'm fine with them bringing it to trial. But I mean, we all see a lot of cases like the Kim Potter taser case. That was an unjust conviction because the judge failed to correctly identify what manslaughter meant, what reckless conduct meant.
I believe the judge in that case, by the way, I think she recognized the issues with that case and sentenced her to like the latest
14 months, like
sentence.
nothing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she knew she screwed up.
Yeah.
There's lots of these cases. The Ahmaud Arbery case, the jogger case in Georgia.
Yeah.
The judge just refused to define what the admittedly ambiguous citizens arrest law was in Georgia, citizens arrest statute from like 1867. The judge just said, "Oh, well, I'll let the jury decide what that means." And that's not the judge's job. That's not the jury's
That's
job.
the way it's supposed to work. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, maybe if the judge had correctly defined it and the jury convicted anyway, it would have been a legitimate conviction. But in my mind, that those convictions of those guys is always questionable because the judge let the jury decide what the law is. And if there's anybody who shouldn't be deciding what the law is, it's definitely the jury. So we see these kind of cases all the time where it's just not done right. And I don't really care about the outcomes of these cases. None of these defendants are friends of mine or family. It doesn't mean anything to me personally if they go to prison. But I care a lot about the process. And because it really is the process is what determines the value of the system. And if we have a corrupt or defective or broken process and you can't have confidence in any of the outcomes, why shouldn't people just be shooting each other in the street? I mean,
you can have confidence that you're going to get convicted, most likely.
Well,
that's
most
my
defendants.
confidence.
Most defendants. I have to tell people all the time. They're always shocked. I'm like, listen, if you're a criminal defense attorney, most of your clients, get ready, they're criminals.
Yeah. That was like the case that Nick just covered. The gangland shooting. This was, was there enough evidence to definitively say that this defendant shot and killed the other guy? Given the witnesses biased and clearly motivated reasons for testifying the way they did.
Cocaine stripper girl.
But the defendant never said, "Hey, I wasn't hanging out with these gang members cruising the streets that night." That's
and even the defense attorneys, his defense attorneys, after the fact. Because I was so in wonder, why don't they say the state can't prove he wasn't there? Why don't they use this argument? And probably because he told his defense attorneys that he were there. Then that limits the defense attorneys in what they can tell or ask the witnesses of. But for me,
it's pretty. When
all they had was cocaine stripper girl who pled out on evidence tampering on probation. She went from capital murder to tampering with evidence and walks.
I
wonder if she's going to testify completely truthful.
And I wonder, it's going to be interesting, Nick, when you and I watch the preliminary examination for this case, what the next door neighbor had to say. The guy standing out on the porch, because he testified. And again, it's in 2022. It's BLM is still out there. It's a predominantly black neighborhood. It's a white cop. I'm going to be really curious to watch this preliminary exam. Now, mind you, the judge is different because in Michigan we have preliminary examinations conducted at the district court, and then you move up to circuit court and you get a different judge for the actual trial. But it'll be interesting to see what evidence is presented.
I just have to. A few weeks ago, I saw this case where the juror who came out talking about it said, well, we thought he did it, but the jury instruction, we couldn't convict them because of the jury instruction. We believe this happened, but according to how the law was written, we could not vote guilty. So that is how important jury charges or jury instructions are as well.
Well,
As
also,
They
long-
are very important.
the whole concept of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, in my experience, that's the biggest weakness in the criminal justice system at trial. Especially defense attorneys do such a poor job driving that home to the jury. You can be 70% sure that somebody committed a crime. That's supposed to be an acquittal.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah,
supposed
right.
to be a conviction. But criminal juries, they routinely, I just know it in my gut, they're making preponderance of the evidence decisions. They're like, well, I feel he probably did it. And they're sending people to prison. You're supposed to be like 90% sure this guy committed the crime before you send him to prison. But we don't do that. And the judge never says that to the jury.
My mom would be the best person to sit on a jury from a defense perspective. She's always told me that she never wants to sit on a jury because she can never convict somebody. She'd be like, I've been putting him in jail or whatever the punishment is, and I wasn't there. No matter what testimony is said, no matter what video is there, I wasn't there. I'm not certain. I will never convict. And that's who you want on your defense jury.
Yeah.
If we could just get a whole jury full of those people that are like reasonably thinking about it. Now, she might be a little to the extreme. But that's supposed to be the system. It's like you have to be certain, like not just in your gut, but certain that this person is guilty.
Yeah.
Beyond any reasonable doubt.
Yeah. And some have the wording in the jury charges the your moral conviction is that this person is guilty. And I'm like, that's lower than 50%. I mean, that depends on your morals. How can that's not it? Yeah. But I have this.
We're ending soon, Dolly.
Yeah. Just every time I walk into checking a trial out, I listen to the opening statement. I have a good amount of questions. All of them have to be answered by the prosecution by the end of their case in chief. Okay, I have this answer, I have this answer, I have this. Some cases I end up with more questions. And then, no, it's not guilty. And yeah, but I am I admit, I am pro-defense. Or at least making the prosecution do their job and the investigators do their job diligent.
Yeah, I mean that's the role of us criminal defense attorneys. It's not our job is not to make our clients innocent. And that would be crazy. Imagine if that was
but
the
then
job.
Again, you have this Supreme Court decision that cops can lie in interrogation under certain circumstances.
Sure.
Yeah, but my question, just generally, you have people, cops, who are trained to lie, but then in court they are trustworthy.
But they're lying for a purpose, Nick. They're lying,
right?
And
they're not under oath
with the heart of gold.
Yeah, and you're the only. I mean, even a lot of non-democracies don't allow their cops to lie. But I read that statute, and
there's some new law passing in Michigan where cops won't be able to lie to children, which is interesting. But I don't know if it just passed or if it's on its way to passing. I just saw it in the news the other day. That's interesting, and that might be sort of the start of like maybe we can't allow our cops to lie to us. But then there'll be a whole line of cases about what actually is a lie.
Yeah, and I read that old statute. I can't remember. It's not that broad, but all the subsequent case law. Yeah, you can lie in that situation because they reference back, and then they reference back, and then all of a sudden the goalposts are this big.
And worth keeping in mind, even Miranda was a 5-4 decision.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah.
So we all assume that Miranda is the most obvious thing in the world. We all have Miranda rights. We see it read on the every TV police drama ever. It was a 5-4 decision. It was this close.
I don't think today people would care about if they're, because Mr. Miranda was he was a jerk. Let's just say that he was a
bad dude.
Yeah, he was a bad dude.
He ended up getting murdered himself, I believe.
I believe so.
Yeah. But and then it goes back to everyone has a misunderstanding of what Miranda means. and they didn't meet or read me my Miranda rights, so now that whole case has to be kicked out. People have insane ideas, and these are the people sitting on your jury.
Yeah.
So it comes down to really bad defense attorneys, really bad judges, prosecutors that see this as a political stepping stone, notches on their belts for every conviction, overcharging people. It's just a whole systematic issue.
It's bad all around, right? So I'm sure there's plenty of criminal defense attorneys out there who their job, as they see it, they go into the office every day. Clients come in, maybe they sit in the courtroom, and pulling clients, whatever you have to do, right, to make a living. But they know their clients are mostly guilty. They're not putting 150% effort into every client. It would be hard to survive like that. You go in, you do what the law and your ethics require you to do. You crank the handle. The client gets convicted because, in fact, they are guilty of whatever it was it is. But you never become a really good criminal defense attorney like that because you're doing the minimal effort. And unfortunately, and people don't know, most people can't pick an attorney. I mean, they're not competent to pick an attorney. They don't know the right questions to ask. They don't know how to contextualize the answers. And they end up, attorneys like everybody else, every other profession is on a bell curve, right? So 80% of the people are kind of in the middle and 10% of them really suck. And then 10% of them are really good. And the 10% that are really good are definitely the attorneys you want on your side if you're looking at any serious time in prison. But they're not easy to identify. They're not easy to find, and they tend to be super expensive.
Yeah.
So I covered the Megan.
I think Bruce Harvey out of the YSL trial, the tall older gentleman with a ponytail, is $1,200 an hour.
Yeah. Well, I covered the Megan Amirowitz case that was out of Oakland County here. That was a young lady who was charged with involuntary manslaughter of her father. Pouring a lie on him was the allegation. Yeah. But so I went to the courtroom a few times for that, and I spoke with her public appointed attorney, and I sort of know him just professionally, we're not friends or anything. But chit-chatting with him about the case, I didn't feel the heart and soul in that defense. Where I'm watching it from the background, I'm like, I see a ton of arguments here. I see a lot of things. She ended up getting convicted, but was sentenced to time served and released. The judge, the judge leniency on her.
Yeah, the judge saw through that case.
But I just didn't see sort of the passion that I would have expected from the defense attorney. But then you have like the complete other things, such as Shannon, who was defending Jennifer Crumbly, who I thought maybe was a little too passionate about her client, and let emotions get a little too involved. So it's a weird situation.
Yeah, and then you have from the YSL trial, one of the witnesses, Monktunk, whose attorney, through sheer incompetence, got his client's probation revoked because he didn't read the paperwork before he told him to sign it. I mean, there are those as well.
That's the thing.
I hate to tell people there's a lot of bad lawyers out there.
Yeah.
We can read over the statute. We can watch the videos. We can pontificate about technically and legally and all of that. And at the end of the day, it's half a dozen people in the courtroom and then a dozen people in the jury box that and it's just it's an interesting system. I think it's the best system, but it's a flawed system in some respects.
Every system is flawed because our system over here is quite sterile because everybody goes in and knows exactly what's going to happen. Prosecutor, defense, you have the judge and the layman judges. And everything, almost every trial is identical, regardless of the charge. And so
a perfect criminal trial in America should be that way too. It should be, theoretically.
Well, it should be. Yeah, it should be. There shouldn't be hiding the balls, evidence. We have the Brady rule for a reason, right?
Yeah.
In theory, every trial, whether it's criminal or not, is essentially a rehearsed production for the jury.
Right. The only people who should be surprised by anything are the jury, right? Everybody else should have 100% knowledge of every argument that's going to be raised, every statute that's going to apply, every jury instruction. None of this should be happening in the middle of the trial. I mean, the trial is a performance. It's a theatrical performance for the jury.
It's funny. I had asked, so I've had two trials where I want to bring this up. I had a defendant who needed to testify in this case, and I asked him a dozen times. We kind of ran through the testimony. So I'm going to ask you, this is what you've told me. So this is the answers I'm expecting. And then gave a completely different answer on the stand. And that's one case where I was surprised. And then I had another, civil trial where it wasn't my client, but a witness. And I had asked her, over, I think 3 different times, interviews sort of thing. To describe the situation, everything that went down. And then again, goes and says something completely different on the stand in front of the jury. And I'm like, oh my God, that came out of nowhere. Sometimes you're surprised, but you're not supposed to be, is the idea, right? Like you've talked to everybody and you kind of get an idea of where things are going.
Who is that lawyer in YSL who kept getting held in contempt by the judge?
Oh, Mr. Steele.
Oh my God, he was great.
Yeah.
I loved him. He's like my spirit animal. Yeah, that's what a criminal defense attorney should be.
Yeah, and then you have his attorney.
She was also very good.
Yeah,
she was
who went in there and lectured the judge on the law.
Yeah,
that was,
and you could see it. Yeah, you could see it on the judge. Oh, I fucked up, but I can't admit it. Mm-hmm. And then he was removed.
Jung discovered apparently that you can use AI to make someone a Muppet. So she took a screenshot from the stream and just turned me into a Muppet. Thank you, Jung. That's going up. All right. So this case will be interesting. Nick and I have to pick a date, figure out when we're going to do the preliminary exam. I'd like to do that before the trial starts. Just to kind of get an idea of what the testimony is going to be. And then again, it's still right now, April 28th. So just a few days away, we should be starting this trial.
Yeah, that would be interesting. And I have tons of stuff to do because we just got more evidence out of the Delphi case, including what the toolmark expert said made her determine that the fired casing was a match to the cycled cartridge. And I saw those 5 pictures. I have words.
Was this the guy with the beard and no mustache? The expert did he have a beard and no mustache?
No, it was a her. It was a her.
Oh, okay. Oh.
All that firearms forensic stuff, folks, it's all garbage.
Yeah, I mean,
it absolutely is.
It has to be thrown out sooner.
Unless there's some gross characteristics, the number of lands and grooves, or there's some gross defect in the manufacture of the weapon that leaves a particular mark. But all these, every time they get subtle, it's all nonsense.
Yeah, it is.
It's always just, this is the gun. We are trying to match this. Okay, let's make that happen. No, that's not science. That's nowhere near
It's just
science.
a matter of time before that type of testimony is going to be thrown out. I think it's on its way out, and then they're going to have to revisit a ton of cases.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But Branca, what do you got coming up? I see you've been streaming a lot. You've been doing some live streams or at least premieres.
So I started doing something different, which is like political legal analysis and like all these lawsuits against Trump. And oh my God, it took off. So people really like that. So I'm still doing the use of force stuff, but mostly I'm doing that for our membership over at lawselfdefense.com. And on YouTube, I'm doing a lot of, I guess I'd call it political legal analysis. These crazy lawsuits, these firing lawsuits and these spending lawsuits and these immigration lawsuits against Trump. It's great fun because there's such profound constitutional issues, and people are so insane because it's all TDS driven, and Trump is there. He's involved. So there's always that element of chaos being thrown in. But like this guy, the MS-13 guy, they threw out, Abrego Garcia.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And the judge in that case, Paula Zinnes, federal judge, I call her the black-robed, unelected, tyrannical, inferior district trial court judge, Paula Zinnes. She's insane. I mean, she is mad. Now she's ordered the White House to appear in her court every day, 5 p.m. to give her a status update on a guy who's locked in prison. Like, his status isn't changing. He's still locked in prison. The whole thing is such a circus. It's so laughable. But I think it's really eye-opening to Americans to begin to, I think for the first time, they're learning hopefully, I'm trying to make them learn how much authority and power the Article 2 executive branch really has under our constitutional order, and how limited the Article 3 judicial branch really is. These judges act like they have infinite authority, infinite jurisdiction, infinite internationally. Probably they think out to Andromeda and the whole universe is within their jurisdiction. They really don't. They have limited jurisdiction.
Andrew Jackson once got a disfavorable ruling from the Supreme Court.
And let him enforce it.
Yeah, let him enforce it. Yeah, that was his call. But that's the thing, and we'll see how it sorts out. But I'm gonna go watch those because I didn't know you were doing political commentary. You always pop up, and I'm assuming you're reviewing some self-defense stuff, which is very interesting. But if you're talking about these cases, because I'm interested in them, although I'm not knowledgeable enough to stream on them, so it should be fun. Go check them out. And there is a link to Andrew's channel in my description. I think in Nick's.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it should be in my description as well. Yes, it is.
Yeah, and then Wendy threw it in chat. I think she's in my chat. So,
by the way, dude, I would encourage you to cover it because these are not complicated legal principles. This is like con law 101 stuff.
Is it? Okay.
Like there's three branches of government. Like there's no fourth branch that's like independent agencies. It doesn't exist. Like there's three branches of government for a reason. So we don't have tyranny. So they're not allowed to infringe on each other's powers. They each have their own court. I mean, it's all stuff we learned the first year of law school, but it's like the American public doesn't know. And I guarantee you the media doesn't know. Those people are idiots.
Oh, they know. They're just not talking about it. 68 more for Lefty to get monetized. Guys, go over and sub to Lefty. He plays video games and such, but he also in the chats gives you, gambling techniques, like how to count cards and stuff like that. We were chatting about that yesterday. So go check him out and give him a little sub. Get him to that monetization level. And then you can learn how to win in blackjack.
Yeah, and also to subscribe to Law Kong, who is that guy, the mailboxes.
Oh, I know. Zachariah Anderson. Branca, did you ever stream that? Zachariah Anderson trial?
I did like the first 2 days of the trial. I streamed it like in real time. It's the trouble for me is I have so much work to do all the time on my desk. And of course it's like weeks of trial and it doesn't draw an audience because it's happened in the past, right. So I just can't in a world of limited time and resources and energy, I just can't justify focusing that time, energy, and resources. Listen, I think it's a complete miscarriage of justice. I think something ought to be done. If I could help on the appeal, I would definitely help on the appeal, but kind of in retrospect, retroactively restreaming the trial, I can't justify it from a business perspective, which sounds really cold-hearted, but I just can't.
Yeah, no worries. But we got Law Kong over there doing it.
Yep, we have Law Kong, and his takes on some of the evidence. His brain is wired differently, and I like it. And because he shows up with a video once in a while that completely blows my mind.
So
and
that
doesn't happen often.
No, that's the type of people you need, just constantly churning out little videos and snippets about all that evidence involved in that case or any other case that you're passionate about. There's a ton of cases out there, but still waiting for my screenplay. I'm working on it. So I decided instead of doing a Zachariah Anderson documentary, I'm doing a bio doc with a screenplay, and I'm working around the legalities of that because I can't really put out untruths. Right. So if I'm making stuff up, it needs to be clearly that I'm making it like I'm assuming some things or making this up for dramatic reasons. So I'm working on the legalities, but I do have a screenplay coming out. It'll be a lot of fun.
Cool.
So with that, we will we'll end the stream. Guys, click the notification button, the like button, do all that. Share these streams out with everybody. Go subscribe to Law Kong and Lefty and Andrew and all those channels. And we'll be back probably next week sometime with the preliminary examination. So, all right.
Take care, guys. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us. Take care.
Yep.